going to pair two articles together because they fit so nicely together. The first is The Inherent Cruelty of a Billionaire Class by Lauren Martinchek. The second is I Can Make You a Socialist in 4 Minutes by Alexei Stel. The Inherent Cruelty of a Billionaire Class. The concept of a billionaire never used to bother me. Perhaps I just never gave it enough thought. The idea of that amount of money belonging to just one individual and their family was so wildly beyond my imagination that I never stopped to consider what that actually means. But there comes a point where the distribution of wealth becomes so vastly divisive that it's not only impossible to ignore, it becomes inherently cruel. We are well beyond that point. The more I learn about American money and how so much of it is unattainable to those who are responsible for creating it, the more I tend to agree with the idea that there should be no such thing as a billionaire. It goes well beyond something as simple as wealth redistribution. Rather, it's an issue of morals and ethics. Is it ethical for Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, to be worth $153.8 billion while his warehouse employees are making around $15 an hour and skip bathroom breaks to avoid being fired by machines monitoring their productivity? I also might add that his employees give back some of that meager income in taxes, while his company employing them did not even pay a penny. Was it ethical for Steve Jobs to be worth billions of dollars while his factory employees in China were living in such devastating conditions that they have suicide nets outside their dormitory windows? Is it moral for someone to have that kind of money while there are people dying because they can't afford the life-saving drugs they need? There is something so boring and dishonest about the argument that they earned it, they should keep it, or that they're being punished for success. It is not a punishment to give back a significant portion of their wealth to those who are responsible for generating that inconceivable amount of money, especially considering that even afterwards they'll still be able to keep more than enough to retain that wealthy, comfortable status. It's just ethical. But I find it difficult to believe that anyone becomes a billionaire by being an ethical, decent human being. Profit motives oftentimes stand in the way of that, and for one thing, that level of financial success is virtually impossible to achieve on your own. Sure, a billionaire may have designed a product or started a business, but of course there comes a point where their wealth is dependent on the productivity and success of those who work for them. I can't think of very many billionaires here in the United States who are known for paying their employees well. Here, I would argue billionaires are more of a burden than an asset. When it comes down to it, it takes a thief to become a billionaire. It requires theft of workers' time, theft of workers' well-earned wages, and theft of workers' productivity. Not to mention the theft of workers' mental and physical health that is such a common occurrence in today's economic system. Becoming a billionaire has nothing to do with extolling the entrepreneur, but rather everything to do with exploiting the system in such a way that allows you to get as much as you possibly can out of your workers as humanly possible, while giving them as little as you can back in return. Including, by the way, their tax money, which is often handed back to these billionaire employers in the form of tax breaks or subsidies. That isn't the free market. That's class warfare. Well, you're right that it's class warfare, but it's not true that tax money pays for anything. Technically speaking, our tax money doesn't pay for wars. It doesn't pay for services. Technically speaking, our tax money doesn't pay for anything. It's just a matter of taking the money back out of the system after we spend it in at the beginning. A recent illustration of this idea is how Congress authorized the Fed to spend into existence trillions of new dollars to bail out big banks and corporations. They didn't have to raise taxes to do this. But your implication is still correct that we, the workers, foot the bill. I'm not interested in arguing that the billionaires themselves are inherently evil. I am. But the culture of the system they operate within is dependent upon the crony capitalist exploitation of labor. And they wrote the rules that exploit labor. So yes, they are inherently evil. In a just economy, billionaires would simply not exist, and they should be taxed until they no longer do. And don't forget riots, pitchforks, and guillotines. I Can Make You a Socialist in 4 Minutes by Alexei Stel. Unlike capitalism, a cooperative-based socialism would actually be consistent with common sense moral principles. People who work harder and longer should get paid more than others, right? Nobody should get something for nothing, should they? And it isn't fair when people take the fruits of others' labor, is it? Those might seem like common sense ideas or even conservative ideas, but they're actually socialist ideas. And if you agree with them, you might just be a socialist. I can show you why in 4 minutes. First, it's pretty obvious that people aren't currently paid according to their relative efforts. The average American is paid $31,000 per year, but the top 1% of earners make $737,000 per year, and the top 0.1% make $2.8 million annually. For those incomes to be proportional to effort, the top 1% would have to work 24 times harder than the average American, while the top 0.1% would have to work 91 times harder than average. And clearly that isn't possible. It would be incredible if someone could work 3 times harder than average, let alone 24 or 91 times. So people aren't currently paid according to relative effort, but on closer inspection, capitalism itself is the problem here. Any economist will tell you that under capitalism, wages are not determined by effort. They are determined by the supply of and demand for certain kinds of labor. Basically, the more money a company can make by employing you, and the fewer other people there are with your particular skills, the more that company will pay you. So in capitalism, wages are determined by the rarity and value of your skills, not by your effort. This explains why a CEO might be paid 100 times more than the average American. A CEO has very specific and rare management skills that can make the company shareholders a lot of money. They might also work hard, but that's not why they are paid so much. And what about those shareholders? What do they do? Well, nothing really. Shareholders own shares and are paid for owning them. They are paid in dividends, which are essentially parts of companies' profits. Shareholders also make money by eventually selling shares at a higher price than they bought them for. Certainly, there is risk involved in being a shareholder. There is always the possibility that your shares will become worthless overnight if the company fails, but just risking your money isn't work. We don't see gambling as work, do we? I can just picture some of the reactions of the people in my own family who are 1 generation older than I am. I can just see the expressions on their faces. However, in capitalism, there is an entire class of people who live off of their investments. In fact, they are the wealthiest group of all, even wealthier than high-paid CEOs. Take the case of billionaires. It is literally impossible to make $1 billion through work alone. Even if you were paid $2.8 million per year, like the 0.1% of workers, it would take you 357 years to make $1 billion. No, that kind of money only comes from investing. And as we have seen, investing is not work. So capitalism is a system in which a whole group of people gets paid millions and billions of dollars for doing nothing at all. Where does this money all come from? Well, from the rest of us, of course. While shareholders get paid for owning shares in companies, the rest of us have to work for those companies, generating all of their profits. What's more, as any economist will also tell you, capitalistic companies only employ people when it is profitable for them to do so. In other words, you must be worth more to the company than your wage, or else they wouldn't have employed you in the first place. But this means that the company is taking part of the money that you made away from you. Why did nobody ever teach me this in school? So in capitalism, companies take part of your work as profit, and then they give that profit to the shareholders who don't work for it. Capitalism is therefore a parasitic system in which the fruit of workers' labor is given to non-workers. What do socialists propose we do about this? Very simply, they propose that we let the workers own their own companies. That way, there would be no separate class of shareholders. The workers and the owners would be the same people. Socialists disagree about how exactly we should achieve worker ownership, but one simple proposal is a cooperative system. In a cooperative business, every worker owns a proportion of the company and so is given dividends when the company performs well. Furthermore, as shareholders, the workers could elect their own managers. That would be wonderful, and collectively decide their own pay scale. The end result would be a system in which people are paid according to the difficulty of their role. So that means our essential workers would get paid the most, right? So unlike capitalism, a cooperative-based socialism would actually be consistent with common sense moral principles. People would be paid according to their effort. No one would get something for nothing. No one would be parasitic upon the work of others. So all you family members, you know who you are. We would be getting rid of the problem of parasitism, not adding to it. Is it practical? Yes. There are already some immensely successful cooperatives around the world. For example, the Basque company Mondragon is a multi-billion-dollar cooperative with 74,000 employees. There are also hundreds of socialist economists around the world who have developed many practicable policies. For example, the LSE economist Thomas Piketty has developed the idea of a global wealth tax to tackle the issue of undeserved income from investments. The issue then isn't so much whether socialism can work, but when it will be given the chance to work.